Welcome to the series of tutorials on keyboard shortcuts in BricsCAD. A thorough knowledge of these shortcuts will help you save time while you use BricsCAD software to execute various tasks. We will start with the function keys. The F1 function key invokes the help command in BricsCAD. I'll press F1. Now you can access the Bricsys Help Center. You can input any keyword in the search box to get a corresponding help. When you press F2 function key, you will get the prompt history window. In this window, you can see the commands given by the user and the prompts given by the software. When you press F2 again, this screen will disappear. Basically, F2 function key is a toggle key. F3 function key will let you turn on and off the entity snap modes. At the status bar, you can see that the entity snap is off. Now, for example, if you try to draw a line from the center of the circle, I'll click on the line command. When I keep the cursor on the periphery of the circle, the center point is not identified. That's because the entity snap is off. Now I'll press F3 function key to activate the entity snap. Now you can see that it is on. I repeat the line command. Now when I keep the cursor on the circle, you can see that the center point is identified. That is because the center point entity snap mode is active. Hence, F3 function key is also a toggle key. Using the F4 function key, we can turn on and off the 3D entity snaps. Suppose if I want to construct a circle with the center right at the center of this face, I'll click on circle command and choose center radius option. When I take the cursor onto this face, the center of the face is not identified. That's because the 3D entity snap is off. Now I'll press F4 function key. You can see that the 3D center is identified. I'll pick to define the center of the circle and I'll give a radius value to specify the radius. And I'll give enter to construct a circle. Hence, F4 function key is also a toggle key using which you can turn on and off the 3D entity snap. Using the F5 function key, we can change the isometric planes while performing isometric drafting. Now you can see that your cursor is a normal cursor because you are in the rectangular snapping mode. To change this to isometric snap, you have to give snap style command. Set the snap style to 1. Now you can see that your cursor changes to an isometric cursor. Now let's create a simple isometric drawing of a cuboid. So I'll click on the line command. I'll start from a point here. I'll give a distance of 8 units, downwards 5 units, leftward 8 units, and click on close. Now I'm working on the left plane. To change the plane, press F5 function key. Now it is changed to isoplane top. I'll continue the line command. Now you can see that I'm working on the top isometric plane. I'll type 5, then 8, then I'll come back to this point. Next, I have to work on this plane, which is the right plane. So press F5 function key again. Now isoplane right is active. Continue creating lines. 5 downwards, and I'll come back to this point. Hence, I've created a simple drawing of a cuboid by changing the isometric planes using the F5 function key. F6 function key can be used to toggle the Dynamic UCS feature. In BricsCAD, Dynamic UCS works in 2D entities as well as in 3D entities. This is an inclined line. I would like to draw a line at a distance of 4 units from this endpoint. So I'll start with the line command and hover the cursor closer to this endpoint, and you can see that the UCS will get automatically aligned on that entity. Now when you move the cursor rightward, you can see a little tick mark in it. Now I'll type the value 4. Now you can see that you have started a line at a distance of 4 units from that endpoint. This is a 3D entity. I want to sketch a profile on this inclined face. For that, I'll use polyline command. When I hover the cursor on this face, you can see that the UCS will get automatically aligned. Now I'll pick the endpoints of this face to trace a polyline profile. Hence, by using the F6 function key, we can toggle the Dynamic UCS feature on 2D as well as in 3D entities. F7 function key toggles the display of grid. When you press F7 key, the grid will get turned on, and when you press it again, it will get turned off. The F8 function key can be used to toggle the ortho mode. When the ortho mode is on, the cursor is constrained to 90-degree angular increments. Now I'll turn on the ortho mode by pressing the F8 key, and I'll draw few lines using the line command. I'll start from this point. Now you can see that the cursor is constrained in horizontal and vertical directions. The ortho mode can be turned off by pressing the F8 function key. By holding down the shift key, you can temporarily turn off the ortho mode. Now I'll hold down the shift key. Now you can see that the cursor is moving freely in all directions. Pick a point over here to create an inclined line. By releasing the shift key, you can come back to ortho mode. The F9 function key can be used to toggle the snap mode. When the snap mode is on, the cursor snaps at fixed increments, and this increment is set using the snap command. So I'll give snap command. The present spacing is 0.5. I'll give a new spacing. I'll type 1. Now I'll go to line command. Now the snap mode is on in the status bar. Now when I move my mouse, you can see that the cursor jumps at an increment of 1 units. Suppose if I want to create a rectangle with a dimension of 5 by 1 units, I'll click over here to start with, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units in the horizontal direction and 1 unit in the vertical direction. I'll come back to this point and close it. Now I'll press F9 function key to deactivate snap. I'll click on line command again, and when I move my mouse, you can see that the cursor is moving freely and it is no longer snapping at fixed increments. F10 function key toggles the polar tracking mode. You can make the cursor snap at fixed angular increments by specifying a polar angle. Before activating the polar tracking, you should make sure that the ortho mode is off. Now I'll activate the polar tracking. Right-click at the polar button at the status bar and click on Settings, and here you can specify a polar angle. Presently it is set at 45. I'll change the angle to 15 degrees. Now I'll draw a line from this point. When I move my mouse, you can see that it is snapping at 0 degrees. Now when I move it in this direction, you can see that it is snapping at 15 degrees, then 30 degrees, 45, 60, 90, etc. Likewise, using polar tracking, you can make the cursor snap at angular increments. Now I'll press F10 again to turn off the polar mode. F11 function key can be used to toggle entity snap tracking mode, using which we can draw entities using other entities as references. But before using entity snap tracking, we should make sure that at least one mode should be active in entity snap. Now let's create a circle right at the geometric center of this rectangle. So I'll click on the circle and click on center radius option. I'll hover the cursor on this particular edge of the rectangle. Now the midpoint is identified. When I move the mouse vertically up, you can see a temporary tracking line. Now I'll hover the cursor onto this particular edge, and that midpoint is identified. Now I'll hover the mouse leftward and you can see a tracking line. When I bring it somewhat closer to the center of the rectangle, you can see that these two temporary tracking lines intersect and you will get the exact point of intersection. I'll pick that center and drag to specify the radius. Whenever you want, you can turn off the entity snap tracking by pressing F11 function key. F12 function key toggles the quad cursor menu. Quad cursor menu or quad in BricsCAD is a fully customizable context-sensitive menu which allows you to easily edit, select, show or hide, and create entities. Now the quad field is active in the status bar. You can deactivate it by pressing the F12 function key. I'll press F12 again to activate it. Now I'll hover the cursor onto this circle. You will see rollover tips, which is the properties of entity under the cursor. Next to that, you can also see the most recently used command in the quad. Now when I hover the cursor onto this icon, you can see the quad menu. Now when I move the cursor, the quad menu expands and you will see various options to edit, modify, draw, select, etc. These are all most relevant commands related with this entity. For example, if I want to modify this, click on the scale tool. Now it will ask you for the base point. I'll pick the center of the circle as a base point and I'll give a scale factor. You can see that the circle will get scaled. Now if I turn off the quad and when I hover the cursor, only the rollover tip is displayed and you won't get the quad menu. This completes the tutorial video on some of the keyboard shortcuts in BricsCAD software. We will continue with this tutorial series, and in the next video, we will see some more keyboard shortcuts used in BricsCAD.